Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and to the mainstream media. This is a very special message to you. You are complicit in the involvement of what's going on in South Africa when it comes to the genocidal situation that the minority groups are facing. And I'm talking about Indians, coloureds, and white people. Yes, you, the fake news, you are complicit in this. Let me give you some history. And this is a shout out to Marlena, by the way. During the 20th century alone, we have witnessed the death of millions of people as a result of genocide and systematic mass murder. This has included some 1.5 million Armenians, 3 million Ukrainians, 6 million Jews, 250,000 Gypsies, 6 million Slavs, 25 million Russians, and 25 million Chinese. Then there are 1 million Ibos, 1.5 million Bengalis, 200,000 Guatemalans, and 1.7 million Cambodians. 500,000 Indonesians have died, along with 200,000 East Timorese, 250,000 Burundians, 800,000 Rwandans, and 500,000 Ugandans. The simple fact is that more people have died from genocide than were killed as soldiers in the Second World War. We often talk in isolation about the horrors of the Holocaust, which must never be repeated. But history shows this has not been the case. Crucially, we need to identify the 10 stages of genocide much earlier. It's always been clear they don't happen overnight. In some cases, atrocities are the culmination of years, maybe even decades of hostility, discrimination, and political wrongdoing. Spotting the stages of a genocide is not as difficult as you might think. In fact, what I'll do is I will attach a few links below this video where you can go into your own independent research. Dr. George Stanton, a research professor and the founder of Genocide Watch, coined the 8 stages of genocide back in 1998, something that has since been expanded to 10 different stages. The framework clearly sets out the road to persecution as well as the remedies available, allowing us to provide effective protection to marginalized groups. Now, the reason we're talking about this is because the South African minority population, in particular the white people, who have been singled out exclusively, are at level 8 of the Genocide Watch. And we're going to go through those stages in this video. And if you don't agree with me, put a comment down below. If you do agree with me, put a comment down below. You know, we are facing a horrific situation in South Africa. An absolutely horrific situation. And the rest of the world is looking the other way. All the perpetrators of this genocide have to say is one word: apartheid. And that somehow legitimizes them persecuting the minority group of the whites in South Africa. Now, that is absolutely bullshit. That is not what the rest of the world should be doing. They should be standing up and taking notice. And the media, the mainstream media, the fake news, they should be hanging their heads in shame. Because if this genocide happens in South Africa, oh my God, you have been warned so many times, mainstream media, about this, and you've just looked the other way. So you have actually become participants in the genocide. Just understand that. Every reporter, CNN, BBC, MSNBC, if something happens in South Africa that is accepted as a genocide, you personally are responsible because you looked the other way, despite all the evidence being provided to you. I'm just putting that on the line right now. So you can't duck and dive and say, oh, we didn't know, we didn't know. You do know. Now, let's look at the 10 stages of a genocide. Let's start off with stage 1. Okay, stage 1 is the classification of a group. Whether about ethnicity, race, religion, or nationality, genocides always start with the idea of an us and them. It is what sets the rest in motion. Societies which are the most split and fragmented are seen as the most vulnerable. For example, in the textbook's genocide underway against Rohingya Muslims, long described as the world's most persecuted minority, a history of segregation and a lack of citizenship has set the stage for today's bloodshed. And the world looked the other way. Stanton identifies the main preventative measure here as simply developing universal institutions that make no reference to difference. This way, barriers between people become almost impossible to raise. Tanzania is a strong example of this, where a shared language has allowed for a far more diverse and peaceful society than what may have been otherwise. Let's have a look at stage 2, symbolization. Under symbolization, names, caricatures, colors, we symbolize our classifications. A genocide becomes increasingly likely as we begin to apply these in hate-driven ways to members of groups. The symbols slowly become less about identification and more about identifying outcasts. The yellow star for Jews under Nazi rule, or blue scarves for the eastern zone of Khmer Rouge, Cambodia, are prime examples of how they used to dehumanize real people. Likewise, the clothing or symbols of a community can be outlawed, thereby denying people the right to identify inversely. The use and promotion of symbols such as Nazi swastikas and KKK costumes can make the wearers feel superior and justified. Based on this cultural support for outlawing symbols such as the Nazi swastika, whilst ensuring the freedom of expression remains in place for non-hate groups, is perhaps the most useful method of fighting against a stage. Likewise, the denial of symbolization, such as Bulgaria's refusal to supply yellow badges to the Jewish population, meant that the symbol never generated the connection it did in Nazi Germany. Now, the problem we have in South Africa is called, quite simply, skin color. So, symbolization is something that you cannot do away with in South Africa. What about level 3? Let's have a look. Discrimination. Once classification and negative symbols are in place, discrimination becomes all too possible. The targeted group becomes powerless, loses civil rights, and often robbed of even basic citizenship. For example, the Nuremberg laws of 1935 stripped the Jewish population of the right to employment of any government institution or university. Now, consider what's happening in South Africa with black equity or black equality employment. BEE, also broad-based black equality employment, or BBBEE. It is clearly a racist policy aimed at making sure that the white population cannot be employed. And it's based on the color of the skin. There's no question that that fits perfectly into what we're talking about here. That's level 3 of the genocide ladder. The best preventative measure here comes from full political empowerment and citizenship, irrespective of grouping. By outlawing discrimination in any form, people are able to fight back against violations as well as being protected against them in the first place. Now let's have a look at the next level. We're going to level 4, and that is dehumanization. Okay, in dehumanization, the culmination of Stanton's previous 3 stages, dehumanization removes the very base of someone's identity. We are all revulsed by murder, but this is eliminated if people aren't seen as people. In the Rwandan genocide, for example, many partakers failed to comprehend their Tutsi victims were human. Instead, they were seen as cockroaches and vermin to be exterminated. Now, if you look at what's happening in South Africa, we are way beyond stage 4. The white population is seen as a soft target. You look at the torture that farmers are put through, the inhumane way that home invasions take place. I mean, it is just appalling. It goes way beyond robbery as suggested by Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa. Oh, by the way, Cyril Ramaphosa is the one who said to Donald Trump that there are no white farm murders, knowing that he was telling a complete and utter lie at the time. While there must be safeguards in place for free speech, hate speech and propaganda is not part of this. Stanton himself notes that societies who fall victim to genocide rarely have such constitutional protection. Now let's have a look at stage 5, organization. Stage 5, organization. Genocide will always be an organized operation. The state will often take the lead while using militias, rogue officers, or local groups to avoid government responsibility. The state will often make it appear informal while funneling money and aid to the groups willing to execute. Now, in South Africa, the government have policies in place which basically are disempowering the entire white population, and the latest one, of course, is the expropriation of land without compensation. And the interesting thing here is while the government is talking about expropriating land from the white population, claiming that it was stolen from the black people when it never was, is that when they've got that land, they're going to lease it out. And in that lease policy, the only group that are excluded from actually making an application to lease land back from the government are the white population. It is important that these militias and the option of joining them are made legal. Stanton also argues in favor of arms embargoes on governments, such as trade embargoes against Serbia in 1999, and citizens complicit in genocidal massacres, while creating commissions to investigate the violations similar to the National Commission for the Fight Against Genocide in Rwanda. Now, in South Africa, you've got what they call the MK Vets, which is the ANC fighters who fought during the 1980s, 1970s to try and liberate South Africa. And today, they actually are an army in South Africa, very, very hostile to the white population, but totally supported by the ANC. You can see the marriage there with stage 5 of the genocide. Let's have a look at stage 6, polarization. Okay, let's have a look at polarization. Discrimination, hatred, and extremism drives populations apart. Marriage and even basic social interaction may be outlawed. For example, Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar saw their right to vote rescinded in 2015. Meanwhile, terrorists may target and eliminate perceived moderates to silence the centre ground. Now, what you have in South Africa is you have radical political parties like the EFF and the BLF, where they're clearly advocating for their supporters to just take over the land owned by white people. And not only that, they're actually advocating that they go and exterminate them. And for some reason, even the South African Human Rights Commission has not seen that as hate speech. Quite extraordinary. Of course, the South African Human Rights Commission is run by the ANC government. To prevent this stage, security must be provided to political figures and human rights groups at risk from extremists, while also guaranteeing greater freedoms of travel if required. Denying extremism the ability to silence other voices ensures that it becomes increasingly difficult for intolerance to spread unopposed. Now, what the ANC government are doing right now in Parliament is passing laws that are going to disempower security companies. In other words, the security companies and their staff will not be able to carry arms. And why do you have a security company? Because you've got to protect the people you're supposed to be representing. But guess who does carry arms in South Africa? All the gangs. They've got hundreds of thousands of illegal weapons out there, many of them supplied by the South African Police Service at a cost. The whole system is corrupted. And of course, when you talk about that particular side, the main target now, because they're seen as affluent and seen as something that's worth stealing, are the remaining white population, the minority group in South Africa. Let's have a look at the next stage, 7, preparation. Okay, preparation. States that engage in genocide are fixated by blood. Perpetrators profess that they have a final solution through ethnic cleansing or counter-terrorism and build task forces and infrastructure that will accelerate their massacres. Once the population is both fearful and loyal and a victim group has been located, they offer the simple choice of kill or be killed. Arms embargoes, international pressure and prosecutions are just some of the matters that governments can be held to task if they're thought to be building to a genocide. These all require the support of the international community, though. We all need to play our part. Now, South Africa, the whites in South Africa are beyond stage 7, and the governments of the world are still looking the other way. You know what that does? That makes them complicit in any genocide that might happen in South Africa. And I'm talking about governments like the Australian government, the American government, the British government, the Dutch government, the French government, the German government, and I can go on and I can go on and I can go on. But all these governments are just looking the other way, like the mainstream media. Let's go to stage 8, which is clearly happening in South Africa. And stage 8 is persecution. Persecution. Once victims have been identified and separated, things escalate quickly. Death lists are created, property is removed, and they may be sent to ghettos, concentration camps, or inhospitable regions of the nation. Massacres begin. Now, what's happening in South Africa is basically property is being removed. We've got expropriation of land without compensation happening to the white population, and that might flow onto their pension funds and just about every asset they've got that the government can get their hands on. And if you look at the way the government is starting to rally, and mainly through the parties like EFF, targeting the white population, talking about white monopoly capitalism, and all these little buzzwords that are meant to inflame the situation, clearly, with 117 anti-white race-based laws already in place in South Africa right now under the ANC government, South Africa is definitely at level 8. Let's look at level 9, extermination. We've seen how many whites have been killed by blacks, and it is black on white violence. There's very, very, very little white on black violence. It is almost unheard of. The violence that's been perpetrated here is black on white violence. And you're talking about a tiny percentage of the overall population here, a small minority. With extermination, it is here where mass killings become legally known as genocide, when the victims are no longer seen as fully human. A steep downwards spiral starts. If this stage is reached, then regional forces must be mobilized by the Security Council. If the conflict is beyond their capabilities, then the only option is a multilateral UN-led force. The priority becomes a matter of saving as many lives as possible, while simultaneously ending any chance of it continuing. Now, we're not quite there yet. We're at level 8. But it's getting closer and closer to level 9. And the governments of the world and the mainstream media are both complicit in what's happening in South Africa against this minority group called the white population. It is totally outrageous in this modern age. And as I said, they can never, ever suggest that they didn't know this was happening. There is so much of this information out there, but they continue to look the other way. And oh my God, if a genocide does happen in South Africa, believe me, heads are going to roll around the world. And the mainstream media will be forever ridiculed and seen as the scum that they are. The final stage is 10, which is denial. And quite simply put, the last of the 10 stages of genocide, denial will outlast death. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see what I'm saying is totally correct. The white population in South Africa right now are at stage 8 of a genocide. And if you look at what happened just this week in cities and towns, the fires, the way that municipalities have been attacked, the home invasions going on, the murder rate that's happening, South Africa is out of control. The government has absolutely no understanding of what it's doing. It is completely incompetent, and it is completely corrupt. And it has just totally destroyed what was a really sound, stable country. Only took them 25 years. Now, I'm appealing to anybody out there who watches this video to please alert your politicians and your reporters and your media to this video so that they can see for themselves that South Africa is standing on the cusp of a genocide when it comes to the white population. And if they don't do anything after being alerted, then they are complicit in this genocide. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates, and have a great day. Bye for now.